Hi, today I am doing a small session on coronavirus and the possible implications of what has just happened around the world. I'm not going to do any kind of a deep dive into trying to study how it happened because really that's not the point. What's going to happen in the next few months to possibly a year and over a year perhaps is going to be our focus and concern. I have a few notes here. Typically, I don't do cheat sheets, but there's quite a bit that I need to cover. Unfortunately, some people have not really understood the impact of this kind of a pandemic. They believe that it is something like a mass flu and maybe it'll just go away like SARS did or H1N1 did. But I want you to understand that the kind of geopolitical realities we are living in today, with digital business the way it is today and trade being extremely high between countries, what impacts one country is not going to stay limited there. So the bad news of global geographies kind of fusing and us being a global market is that anyone's headache is now your headache. Okay. Anyone who thinks that, oh, it didn't happen in my country, we should be absolutely fine, is actually living in fool's paradise. Wake up. That's the first thing. The second one is that you need to comprehend what happens within your country. So let's go within. One of the observations I've had in the past few days, when I've had to step out for unavoidable reasons, is that I notice quite a lot of migration happening, but this is reverse migration. By that, what I mean is that it's not rural folks coming into the urban areas, which is considered normal and healthy, because this means that the economy is booming. It means that there are jobs. It means this is what's driving them to leave their farms and actually come out to work in the cities. But when there is reverse migration, it means something is wrong with the economic setup. And daily wage worker is the first indicator of some kind of collapse. So when people can't earn money on an everyday basis, whether they are selling food on the street, whether they are daily masons or top job kind of people, the fact that they cannot earn means that they're going to have to go back to where they came from. That migration has already begun. That also means that in the year ahead, we might see a shortage of hands, because who has left in the middle of the year or the start of the year is not going to come back. That's not an expense that they'd be in a position to handle. So we need to be mentally prepared for a higher cost, which would be now attached to daily laborers, and businesses that are attached to them, such as building, construction, real estate, and many others, will see the first impact. The other thing for you to notice and observe is that, especially in a country like India, where there's a great number of rural farmers, who are like the spine of the country, we complained about them leaving their jobs and coming to urban India. But when there is a bad day, like we're going through bad days right now, these are the people who actually have a fallback plan. They actually have another source of income. They have a method to survival, and the survival is attached to the land. Friends who are really close to me would have seen me argue about this. Like, for the last 15 years, I've been hollering that when the economy tanks and this golden economic period is over, those who own land, like a lot of land, are going to be the ones who survive, because you can still have a borewell and you can grow your own crops and you can have your own animals and then somehow create a little ecosystem there that sustains you. But people in the city are ones who actually depend on one job. And we're not in a culture where you have 2 or 3 jobs. India is not. So the worst affected will be people in urban India who don't have other means of income, especially if incomes are in some way affected for those particular pockets that will be affected. This also means that farmers who actually are back there in their hometowns taking care of fields perhaps have not got the necessary kind of support, maybe because the extension of the disease or the number of people who are not allowed to come down and mingle also affects how farming actually got done this time. In 3 months, a kharif crop is kind of done and out with the harvest, and if you actually have a 3 month delta of production, you've gone out and hit food security just right there. Even if a large number of farmers actually made it, you have an impact of, let's say, 25% to 30% reduction in production for a country like India with a population of 1.3 billion. 20% down is big news. This means that the price of food is going to go up. And I'm talking about fresh food. Anything that's fresh food will go up in the year, like it or not. And there's no denying it. I'm just being pragmatic about it because this is commonsensical. The other thing that might go up in consumption, though, will be ready-made foods and things that have longer shelf life. I'm going to deliver a little bit of a freakonomics here because that's a little bit, it's more of a warning than anything else. When there is a pandemic or there is a famine-like situation, which has happened in the past, I'm not talking about now, historically, people ended up taking up certain other types of foods, which may not necessarily have been their first preference or even their habit. When people move to consuming other things, such as wheat and wheat kind of products and more of refined flour and refined flour based foods, especially those that will last for several months, you will see that this kind of consumption is high on gluten. And the longer you consume gluten, within a year's time, you can have GI issues. And you shouldn't be surprised if dietary habits start to change because of certain kinds of shortages and people try to get it done with quick meals and whatever. And the dependencies on these kind of foods is higher in urban India. So I'm not talking about rural India, but I'm saying urban India can experience a strange freakonomics exactly a year from now, where gluten-related issues will start to show up in the form of anemia, in the form of GI related disturbances and inability to digest certain foods, discomfort, and many other things that will baffle you. But they don't need to be baffled. That's gluten. So you're going to have to watch what you're going to eat after this if there is a shortage of natural foods. From a company standpoint, now I'm coming to organizations and companies. See, there would be a lot of companies that were at the brink of mergers, who were going to get acquired, who were supposed to have investors come in. But the delay that's happened because we're not in a position to work and people are working from home, most of the things are put on standstill, means that the buying ability today would be somewhat threatened, and those who can still buy will become extremely powerful. So it's a buyer's market after this. And seller is obviously going to be the one in trouble because delay is equal to death. And that's not something that you can afford. So a lot of organizations will possibly consider lower pricing, lower valuation, and a whole lot of other complexities, because of which there would be a chunk of people who didn't benefit from this, who really went away crying, and there will be another bunch of people who were very gleeful. But that's not so bad because there's at least some part that's okay. It depends on whether these particular investors were locals, which means from within your country, or whether these investors were outside of your country, in which case the political scenario in your country can begin to change. That's bad news then. When it comes to surviving large, devastations or damages, regardless of whether that happened in the crop world or the people world, there is an aftermath, and the aftermath usually, is affecting our ability to spend and our ability to buy. So from a company standpoint and a within country standpoint, there is going to be a great deal of cost cutting. And when budgets become very sensitive, one of the first things that go out is, lofty plans and, big things that you wanted to buy and do that's completely knocked off. The second that goes away is hiring. You won't have the courage to go out and hire people at a time like this. It's really not the safest bet. It's kind of dangerous to go out and take people in at a time when you don't know how money is going to last over the next year, or maybe have a spillover of bad tidings for the next year as well. So you're going to see that a lot of organizations either start hiring freeze, or they would possibly consider options of increasing the numbers of consultants they have, maybe move to contractual workers, and then offer 2-year or 3-year contracts, which is a sensible thing to do because you're not really taking on the burden of a headcount and then be responsible for them. This would allow you fair amount of flexibility to take the necessary decisions in a country like India, which has never been very friendly with a few days of work in a week, which is like 3-day employment and half-day employment kind of scenario, which is very common in Germany and other countries which are very pro maternity and post-maternity windows, and that is how they crafted all this. Well, you're going to be forced to look at this right now. You have no option. But when there is the dearth of funds and an inability to predict your comfort to hire people begins, then you're going to have to look at other options, and some of the safest will be to increase headcount without really increasing headcount, which means keep them all as tertiary employees outside of your actual triangle of employees. When you look at the other aspect of cost save, it's always going to be technology, and that is because our businesses are extremely technology dependent today. Quite a few friends I have that I have spoken to around this time have really sad stories to tell me. One particular company that I'm going to give you as an example has about 35 people, and they're in their second level of being funded. And unfortunate as it is, when they were doing their planning for business, they all thought that it would be sensible to go out and buy desktops because there was going to be roughly 12,000 lesser than laptops. Today, the company has only 5 people at the top who have laptops, because of which the entire company is working with 5 people. They are picking up the burden of the others, and they're all crashing, sleeping 3 hours and 4 hours. They never envisage a day like this. And when they're going to come out of this, they're actually considering retrenchment. Now, you know what? When the weather is tough, when you don't have enough to eat, or you start questioning your ability to really sustain and pay salaries for so many people, you may have a bad time. And because they've lost quite a lot of accounts of businesses around this time and actually said no to certain businesses because they can't take those accounts, they will not have the necessary money to continue paying all these other people. One of the admissions I heard from them was, damn, had I gone out and picked up more laptops instead, I wouldn't have seen a day like this. Business continuity planning, BIP, continuous improvement planning, these are all things that seem very nice, jargony, but when rubber has to hit the road, a lot of companies seem to have missed out on this particular fact, that when tragedy strikes and you want people to work from home, have you made those kind of necessary arrangements for people whose jobs really are important for you and cannot be compromised upon? Or are we looking at temporary cost saves to pay a bigger cost later? Another example is of a company that has lakhs of employees around the world, and as they have now gone out to announce 50% will come to work and 50% will work from home, they don't have the bandwidth. So people who dutifully actually log in to those calls and to actually log into the systems are getting bumped off. And it is an incessant range of bumping off. Like you can keep trying throughout the day. Sometimes people get bumped off 15, 20 times and get annoyed. So those who really want to work are not able to work. And efficiency has gone down, performance has gone down, the motivation has gone down. People are like, damn, I prefer to go to work and take that risk instead, which is bad news. That's not what you want to do. So companies that are quite financially comfortable are now slapping their foreheads, thinking, why didn't we think about this? If we had 60% of the people working from home, do we have the necessary systems to allow that? We never thought that a day like this would come, which is why we took certain calls in a different way. But I think with all that, this particular pandemic has delivered at our doorstep. Those who've not been taking it seriously, and those who think that it's just a few days of government announced holidays and we're going to be working from home and it was a nice experience and then laugh and talk about it later. No, you're not particularly going to enjoy what's going to come after this, because some of those are going to be unpleasant activities that organization leaders will have to do and HR will have to do. They'll have to put a stone in their heart. See, We talk about people leadership, we put it up there saying sensitivity, care, and a lot of other things. But retrenchment is also about caring for the organization, the damyo. You need to love your damyo, the organization. And when there is an inability to pay everybody, and you're going to have to make a choice, in any part of the world, the last one in is the first one out, and the other is, if they're extremely good, you'll still keep them. So basically, people who become redundant will be on that list, and you just have to get your headcount to a size that allows the organization to thrive. So I'm not here to upset you, I'm not here to worry you, but I want you to understand that there are several implications for the coronavirus, and we will see how much of this really comes out and affects us here in India. I think we've done well with trying to contain it, so fingers crossed. Thank you.